And we're back. Yes, we're going racing again after weeks and weeks of phone calls and AMA and Feld working on it and figuring out what venues we could run, what states are going to allow it, what the whole pandemic crisis is, what regulations are going to be allowed. We finally have a resolution. Supercross is coming back. We're going racing on the rumored May 31st date. All 7 rounds, or the remaining 7 rounds, will get accomplished all in one location. It is one of the ones that wasn't rumored early on. A lot of people were, it looked like Phoenix was going to be a possibility. Then Houston was brought up, and then I heard something about Orlando and St. Louis. But it finally comes down to it, looks like we will be going racing. Sounds like in Salt Lake City, Utah. I believe the announcement should be today. It is definitely good for the sport, good for a lot of the teams, a lot of the brands, to just kind of get things moving again. Ultimately, there are some restrictions. This probably, won't be the perfect option for everybody, but it definitely helps a lot of us get moving again. Of course, talking from a private team standpoint, like pretty much anybody outside of the factory OEM teams, the majority of your sponsorship is based off what events you're running, what is contracted to run, and when you don't run those events, you typically get deferred or don't get paid for them. So I think a lot of guys have definitely, from what I've heard, a lot of teams have been struggling. Staff has had their salaries cut. Some people have been furloughed because pretty much nobody was getting paid. Just like of course, that's just like anything in the world right now, whether it's a small business, large business. I know anybody watching this has been affected somehow, some way by this pandemic, whether it's actually been directly from a medical side, maybe somebody they know, their family, and more than likely with most of us, a financial side with either not being able to do your job as regular, between staff cuts and other things. It has not been an easy situation on anybody. I know personally there are parts that, depending on what state you were in and what restrictions you were facing, just what you were even able to do with your everyday life. And being somebody that's a massive motorsports fan, it was definitely a bummer not to get to see anything on TV. So between like NASCAR starting up and now Supercross, hopefully for those still facing hardships at the moment, maybe at least the riders and teams can bring something back to bring a little bit of joy or entertainment to people's lives while we slowly get back to normal inside this country. But in the meantime, like I said, what we're talking about is we are going racing. Like I said, all 7, one location. Sounds like we're going to take up pretty much the month of June to get this done, about 3.5 weeks. We're going to race on weekends and weekdays, all on one location. I believe that leaves, from what they're talking about, 4 East rounds will happen, 250 West rounds in a shootout. 450s, of course, will race all 7. And that'll leave us racing Sundays and Wednesdays. It leaves us with a 1-week gap until the beginning of outdoors, if outdoors was able to start on time, and hopefully it's looking like that will happen on July 4th, although I would not be holding my breath that it'll be at its usual location at Redbud. I think it's going to be a different venue for the opener, but then outdoors will be able to run through July, August, September, into the first week of October. So it'll be really good for, racing sakes for teams, because we'll get to race the month of, pretty much there'll be constant racing and stuff on TV through June, July, August, September, and into first October, get us back to somewhat of a normal schedule. Like I said, with all that, at least on this end, riders can get back into making a paycheck. Teams can get back into getting paid and keeping their guys busy, or otherwise, it's getting difficult. If Supercross itself had waited till October, it's going to be really tough, because even if we did go racing and eventually teams were paid for what they did on track, waiting that long would have been hard. Pretty much a lot of sponsors had to, because of the financial situation and what we're all contracted, for many teams deferred in March. April probably would have all the way through May. And at that point, that loss of revenue would have been really hard on teams to bounce back from. Even if they eventually would have got paid later in the year, it's just hard, as the only form of course, income for a motorsport team in Supercross is sponsorship based. So it would have been really tough to keep some of these guys afloat and keep moving it forward. Albeit going racing does mean there's going to be a lot of restrictions. Of course, we're not looking at having any fans at the venues, and there's even going to be a lot of restriction on staff. I expect it to look like privateers will be rider mechanic only. I think the smaller teams, we'll see, like truck driver, manager, rider, mechanic. Some of the big teams might be allowed a crew chief, but the other thing is the total size of the field. There will be, it sounds like, a set field. So sad to say, not every racer that has raced this year will probably be able to compete. It is going based off of things like who has 2-digit numbers, who has points right now, who's scored points last year, who's on teams. It still will be the majority of the regular field you're used to seeing. Sadly, not quite every rider will be able to join in. And while that is a bummer, like I said, as a whole, my personal feeling, at least for any team, is that the sport does need to get moving in some shape or form, or there's going to be much more lasting effects to operations that have been here for years if we wait much longer. So definitely stoked we're going racing. I could go on and on about what the last 2 months has been like. I'm trying to keep things moving for most teams. There's been plenty of podcasts. So I'll probably do something in the next couple of days, but just want to say for now, we're back probably sometime either before this video goes up or right afterwards. You should be seeing the official schedule announcement and start to learn more about what it looks like for the guys going racing. And probably over the next week or two, you'll get to hear, I'm sure plenty of media outlets will be doing interviews with riders and team personnel and start to explain what these situations are going to look like. But like I said, ultimately, we're back, and I couldn't be happier.